The Pacers have a very key stretch of schedule coming up. Plus, Zach LaVine may be available. Does that make sense to the Pacers? What else from the Bulls matters? And the Madden are underway. We have a lot to talk about on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, y'all. You made it through the week, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we have a lot to talk about. 4 days off for the Pacers. Good time to catch up on a lot of this important stuff right now. And thankfully, there's quite a bit going on in Pacerland. They bought out Daniel Tice. If you want more on that, yesterday's show is all for you. We get into all the mechanics of that, and then we just shout out silly Tyrese Halliburton stats for the last 5 minutes. It's fantastic. We got to hear from Rick Carlisle today. Jalen Smith, Bruce Brown were able to practice. That's good news after injuries they suffered against Philly on Tuesday. So there's lots of other stuff that I can fortunately get to go past those things. And that is one, something I mentioned when talking about their schedule and the schedule preview show back in August, the key stretch they have coming up starting on Sunday. I'll explain why it's important and why it matters a great deal. Two, the Bulls maybe blowing it up. Some reporting from Shams Charania that the Bulls and Zach LaVine potentially looking for a trade. Could the Pacers get involved? What else could they do with the Bulls? Talk a lot about that. And three, the G League is gone. The Mad Ants are rolling. Oscar Tshiebwe has like 6 trillion rebounds in 2 games. We got to talk about the Mad Ants season getting going. We start with the schedule. I mentioned this back in August, like I said, when I did the schedule preview show with Adam, where we run through game by game. And I highlighted this stretch in the schedule to come back to and talk about. Why? Well, let's talk about it. First of all, the background is important here. Pacers 7-4. That's great. They've off to a great start. I had them right now going game by game through the schedule at 6-5. I had them beating Chicago and Charlotte, but losing some of the games that they have won. But they've proven a lot already, right? Their offense looks super legit, best in the league. Tyrese Halliburton looks unguardable against most schemes. They've beaten Cleveland twice, who was top 4 in the East last year. They've beaten the best team in the East last year in Milwaukee. They beat the best team in the East this year in Philly, right? You can kind of throw out some of the preseason expectations for the Pacers, potentially. If their offense is this good, they look fantastic. But still, they're off to a good start against a tough-ish schedule of their season. But they have 2 really important stretches of their schedule that I called out before the season. And this one I think was the most important, one coming right now. That could be the difference between the Pacers being 11-5 going into a really tough stretch, or the difference between the Pacers kind of limping into a tougher stretch. What makes this so important, right? If we get through this stretch, the Pacers could be a team that says, we feel like we could be 13-3, given how their season started. So if you haven't looked at the Pacers schedule, they don't play till Sunday. They play the Magic. Sunday, they play Orlando at home. Then they have an in-season tournament game in Atlanta on Tuesday. Wednesday at home, they play Toronto. Friday, 2 days after that, they play their final in-season tournament game against Detroit. And then Monday, so 2 days after that Detroit game, they play at home against Portland. That is 8 days where they play Orlando, Atlanta, Toronto, Detroit, and Portland. 4 teams that I would say the Pacers are better than, and 1 team in Atlanta that they could be better than, and they play in an in-season tournament game where the Pacers have played well so far. Why is that stretch important? One, because the Pacers have been playing well, and if you can start off really strong with something like 10-6 or 11-5, that does a lot for your team's psyche. That does a lot for the perception of your team and the direction you're heading. Pacers had a strong November last year too, and it carried them for a long time. Tyrese Halliburton hadn't gotten hurt, might have carried them through almost the whole season. So this 5-game stretch is important internally for good feelings. If you start 11-5 and then stumble a few times later on in the season, you can kind of live with that a little more, right? You could feel good about how you started. You made up for some later games. You gave yourself some cushion by already beating Cleveland twice and Milwaukee and Philly. You've given yourself a chance to lose some games you should win. They've already lost 2 that they probably feel like they should have won. But continuing to build that cushion is important, and this 5-game stretch is a big part of that. The second reason this 5-game stretch is important is there's 2 in-season tournament games. They play Atlanta and Detroit. Winning your group in the in-season tournament is great. Doing well in the in-season tournament is good for fans. It's good for the team. They get more opportunities. They can go to the quarterfinals. They can even go to the semifinals and go to Vegas, and that's all awesome. The thing is, that I don't know if enough people are talking about this. If you make it far in the in-season tournament, right? The schedule for the games for the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals aren't set because I don't know what teams are going to be in those or not in those. But if you make the quarterfinals, you're playing better teams, right? You're playing teams that are also in the quarterfinals and have done well early in the regular season. And then if you lose in the quarterfinals, you're still only going to be scheduled against another team that played in the quarterfinals and lost, or you win and you're playing another good team, which if you win, that's a win in the win column anyway. But doing well in the in-season tournament is good, right? If you win enough games to make the quarterfinals, that means you're willing to play harder teams because that means your record in those first four were good. But they could have a hard schedule coming up because of their success in the in-season tournament. I don't think that's a bad thing, to be clear. It's just another added wrinkle of difficulty in their schedule. The other thing is, after this 5-game stretch that I just listed, right? Detroit, Portland, Toronto, Atlanta, and Orlando. Winnable games for the Pacers. After that stretch, they have 6 in a row on the road. Now, granted, that's scheduled games. There's in-season tournament in there, and they will have a home game as a part of the in-season tournament. But at about, potentially, depending on how this all shakes out, 7 of 8 on the road, okay? For sure. How about that? At Miami, who's playing very well. At Miami again, who's playing very well. Then there's the in-season tournament games. At Detroit, they kind of stink. At Milwaukee, at Washington, they kind of stink. And then a back-to-back where you go, for the Pacers, right to Minnesota on December 16th. Then they come home and play LA. So that is a tough stretch with a lot of travel, potentially some tough opponents in the in-season tournament. And then you return home with the tough marquee opponent. And Daniel Tice returning. How about that? So they have a hard stretch coming in terms of travel and unpredictable opponents and potentially difficult opponents. Miami twice, Milwaukee, LA, and whoever they play in the in-season tournament right after this 5-game stretch. So if they come out of this and they go 4-1, for example, and they have 11 wins, or they're 10-6, that gives them a lot more cushion on this upcoming stretch through the in-season tournament to feel good about where they are for the next stretch between that in-season tournament and the trade deadline. And that's really important for a young team that's trying to ascend in the standings, that has looked good to start the season, to have that kind of start, to be able to have cushion for those tough stretches. That's really important. So I've talked, there's a lot of reasons given what's November 17th now. A month from now, the in-season tournament will be over. But the next month of the Pacers schedule is just really, they play, it's the 18th for you. No, this comes out the 17th. That's funny. A month and a day from now, they play the Clippers at home, right? So the next month basically is really weird in terms of easy first part of the schedule, really difficult, hard second part of the schedule. So doing well in that first easier part is really, really important. Now, granted, they have a second important stretch of schedule right after this month. The other stretch I talked about on that schedule show is right after that Clippers game at home. They play, I just clicked off the tab by accident, starting on December 20th. Here's their stretch from December 20th until 2024. They play Charlotte at home, at Memphis. Ja probably back by then, but Memphis is all over the place. Orlando at home, at Houston, at Chicago versus New York. That's a lot of also winnable games. But again, if you do well now, you have cushion for those games. That's another important stretch, especially because trade season will have started or be underway in theory on December 15th. So really this stretch right now, starting Sunday of their schedule, I highlighted it before the season, is important. The way they started makes it more important. The way they've done in the in-season tournament makes it more important. There's just a lot of reasons that these next 5 games are a big deal for the Pacers. And they can stumble once. That's fine. They've built up those cushions with a successful start. But if they can do really well for the stretch, that would bode well for them. Their January schedule is definitely the hardest stretch of schedule for them. So doing well in this month and this easier parts, and then late December again, would go a long way in helping the Pacers getting to where they want to be this season. And we'll cover all those games and how the Pacers are doing and where they are in the standings and the in-season tournament here on the Locked On Pacers podcast, and the many other things going on with this team. Goga Bitadze back in Indiana on Sunday. Looking forward to that, although I probably won't talk about that admittedly too much on the show. But I will talk about the Bulls, who the Pacers have already played and lost to, and they are falling apart. They just lost to the Magic 2 nights ago now on a buzzer beater-ish from Paolo Banchero. And Zach LaVine and the team reportedly okay with looking at trades. Shams Charania had it in the Athletic. Do the Pacers make sense here? Well, I will make the argument for why yes and no, and talk about, more importantly, other players that potentially do make more sense with the Pacers, like one Alex Caruso and some others. Before we do that, we got to talk about two awesome groups of people. The first one, the good folks over at BetterHelp. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. The holidays are coming, and the holidays can be really stressful. You might get some seasonal blues. You might feel like you have a lot of family obligations coming up, lots of travel to do. There's so much that can make this time of year lead to some sadness or anxiety. But adding something new and positive to your life can counteract some of those feelings. Therapy can be a bright spot amid all the stress and change, something to look forward to, make you feel grounded, and to give you the tools you need to manage everything going on. It'll help you with positive coping skills, setting boundaries, empower you to be the best version of yourself. And if you've been thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with licensed therapists, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And I also want to talk to you guys about the Game Time app. Love the Game Time app. I used it when I went to New York to get tickets to watch the New York Liberty play the Dallas Wings, and it was awesome. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event, sports, comedy, theater, music, whatever you're going to. Well, Game Time is perfect because with their killer last minute deals, they're all on prices, the views from your seat, they're in their best price guarantee. There's no more guesswork. You don't need to worry about how you're going to be able to see from where you're sitting. They have views from the seat right in the app. You don't have to worry about the prices. It's all there. You don't have to worry about if you're getting the best price because they have the Game Time guarantee, which means you will get 110% of the difference if you find cheaper tickets in the same section and row for less somewhere else. Everything you want from a ticket buying app, Game Time's got it. How do I know this? Because I've used it. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Bulls. Hear what they're saying about their team falling apart a little bit and maybe having to make a lot of trades and something they maybe should have done a while ago. They kind of remind me, funnily enough, of the 2021-22 Pacers, where it's like keeping that team together was the only thing the Pacers could kind of do that strategically made sense, but they needed to also get off of that team as soon as possible, and they did. And now they're set up much better because they did those things. Zach LaVine reportedly available. Shams Charania dropping that report over the weekend. Not the weekend. What am I saying? Earlier this week, I'm trying to talk while pulling up an article. This came out on the 14th, so 3 days ago. But there's been some reported interested teams. Shams' exact wording is NBA teams are probing the availability of two-time All-Star guard Zach LaVine, and there's increased openness from the Bulls and LaVine about exploring a trade. Both parties, that matters. LaVine has talked about this on the record now. So it's a thing. It's not just some reported nonsense. And Shams' great track record anyway. So Pacers, could they be involved in this, either with LaVine or as a third team or with the Bulls with some other players if they go rebuilding route? Let's dive in to that. Here's the first thing I'll say. Zach LaVine is super good. I think people really underrate him. Not really underrate, that's a stretch. I think people underrate him. Like, to have the with the Bulls, he's had almost 30% usage in his 6 seasons now there, 7, 29.8% usage, 59% true shooting. A lot of self-created shots. His turnover rate keeps getting lower. It's below 10% this year. He has a lot of defensive weaknesses. He is a very much a negative defensive player, but he is a dude on offense. If you can shoot like him and create your own shots like him with the ball in your hand a good amount, that's a valuable player. He's been miscast as the first option on this team right now, but Zach LaVine's good. Zach LaVine is a good player, still in his prime at age 28. I think that gets lost here. And I think from the Pacers specifically, I've seen some chatter about this, not a ton. I think the fit is better than people are giving him credit for. He has to be the best creator a lot on the Bulls. DeRozan can too, but they don't have a good passing on that team. And so he'd be, I think, more efficient and a better player with a better creator. And hey, look, Tyrese Halliburton is on the Pacers. And wouldn't you know it, one of Zach LaVine's all-star seasons, and maybe his best season in the NBA, some metrics say it is, was the only season that Lonzo was healthy for the Bulls. When they had a good passer and connector to set him up and make his life easier, Zach LaVine was better. The season before that, he was also fantastic. But still, the point stands that having a good point guard really helped him. His free throw rate was fantastic that year. His turnover rate went way down. His efficiency, over 60% true shooting. Really great offensive season. One of his, if not his best, depending on who you ask. Having a creator is valuable next to Zach LaVine. So that all, I think, is underrated for him with the Pacers. It fits pretty good. The other thing I think people are getting wrong about Zach LaVine is his contract. People keep saying that's horrible. It's not horrible. If you're an all-star level player, $40 million makes sense. $48 million by the end when he's 31. That's a lot. That's a lot. I would say it's closer to overpay than underpay. It's what it takes to keep all-stars, and I think all-stars are going to cost $40 million in the new CBA and how much the cap is growing in the next 5 years. So it's pretty high. His contract is high. I don't think he's underpaid, right? It's not a like super positive value contract, but he's good. He's really good. He's worth a lot of money for a reason. So I don't think his contract is that bad. Now, the thing that I think people are missing, and some of this is on me because this is how I've talked about the Pacers for a while, but there's been a lot of change since I've talked about this, is people keep saying, well, I've seen this said at least. If the Pacers trade for LaVine, they'll have, his contract stinks. They'll have no cap space for a while. Well, yeah, okay, that's true. But they could be an over-the-cap team now already. Like next summer, I guess not right this second. They're literally right now they are under the cap. They have cap space right this second. But next summer, like I've talked about how they could be a big cap space team, and they still could. It hinges a lot on what they do with Buddy Hield and Bruce Brown. But there's a chance that with Buddy Hield's cap hold and they just keep Bruce Brown, they're over the cap. They're operating over the cap next summer. Like that is very possible for them to do. It kind of depends on what happens between now and the trade deadline. But like their cap space streams could already be done between the Nesmith extension, the signings they made this summer, the draft picks they've done. That already could be a thing of the past. I'm not going to get into the future cap situation too much today, but all this to say, I think he's a good fit in their cap situation. I think he's a good fit with their team, and I think he's a good player. I'm not saying the Pacers should super pursue this, but I think Zach LaVine's good and a decent fit, and I think that alone is enough to at least sniff this if you're the Pacers. So, but let me contradict myself now. Let me be Tony the fence sitter. Like I said with Drew Holiday this summer, I don't think right this second is the time for the Pacers to swing hard. If they get through 25 games and they're 15-10 or better, then I will be fully registered in as, yes, they're good now. Maybe it makes sense. And by then it'll be December 15th, so there'll be more trade possibilities, whatever. So maybe this season is the time to swing hard. But I said it with Drew in the summer, like they're still very much a crescendoing team. Over half of their rotation is guys in the first 4 years of time in the NBA. There's still clearly some evaluation going on, even though they are good. They are a good team right now, to be clear. I don't know if that's the right time to make a trade like this. 2.2 against it. I don't think it's an amazing fit. I did say the fit is better than people give him credit for earlier, but I don't think it's an amazing fit, despite thinking people are underrating it. There's still some clunkiness with him having the ball, what he would have it with alongside Halliburton, although depending on who goes out for him, this could change. But like if Matherin's still around, how does that shake out to be? If someone else who handles the ball, Andrew Nembhard or whatever, is still around, how does that all shake out to be? Other guys in starting five, Bruce Brown, or there's a lot of ways this could go. Who knows who's in the trade? But like it's not the best fit ever, even though I think it's pretty good. But there's still definitely some clunkiness involved, and that'd be a lot of. And the third point, and I think this is my strongest one against it, despite not hitting his contract. Actually, there's two more points I want to make. The fit part is what it is, but I think if I'm the Pacers, I'm almost at the point where it's like anybody with Halliburton is going to be good on offense. He's that good. He can make anybody at least have some level of success on that end of the floor. And so you almost have to skew defense with like every decision you make for the Pacers to have defensive players on the floor, right? So all that to say, right? The third point I had earlier that I skipped over, despite me not hating his contract, salary matching is kind of hard. He makes $40 million this season. So if you're the Pacers, you got to get to just under 31, about 30.7, plus your cap space can get you to Zach LaVine. That's hard when your highest paid player makes 22 right now. So you've got to send either two good players, right, plus a ton of picks, or three players who maybe have a little less value and also a ton of picks, or two players who are good and a good young player and less picks. It's hard, though. It's going to take a lot of players from a salary perspective. The Pacers don't have a really big salary to make it happen. They do have cap space to make inbound stuff like Hield plus Wara plus McConnell is almost an exact salary match using cap space. But then you have to throw in a ton of picks. Those guys are all expiring. Maybe the Bulls will be happy with that. But you have to throw in a ton of draft picks. He's a really good player. I might be overstating the draft picks, but I think it's a lot. So there's a lot of hurdles that make it hard. So I think right now is not the time for this. But come January, I reserve the right to change my mind if the Pacers are much better. But I do think he's good. And I think he's a good fit ish with the Pacers and Halliburton. Good fit ish, not perfect fit. What I do think, though, about this whole situation, if the Bulls blow it up, there's two things I would throw in. One, Patrick Williams. Bad start to the season. I'll straight up admit it. I'm a Patrick Williams fan. He's been bad to start the season. I would still take the flyer if he's somehow available for the Pacers. Let me be clear. I'm talking about a guy who's currently shooting 32.9% from the field and can't make a three. I just can't quit him for some reason. I think there's a good player in there. The evidence is starting to say I'm wrong. The two, and this is the strongest point, if the Bulls really blow it up and they're really moving off of stuff, Alex Caruso should be somebody that the Pacers are interested in. Right this second now, after the Tice buyout, his salary fits into their cap space, right? This season, Caruso makes $9.46 million. The Pacers, at their maximum space, if they get rid of all their cap holds, could just take him in. That's great. He is a fantastic defensive player. He has some limitations, right? He gets hurt a decent amount. He can't play a ton of minutes per game. But dang, can that dude defend? He's a decent enough offensive player. And like I just said, I think anybody can do well enough with Halliburton. He can pass it. He's smart. He musts his balls every second. He's out there. Like, he's just good. He's just really good. And he's a former champion, and he made all defense last year. He is a great fit with the Pacers to me. If he is somehow available, he would cost a lot. Like, he would cost stuff, like serious stuff. But, man, I think would he be a good fit with the Pacers if they can swing it in a trade that makes sense. Those are my Bulls thoughts. LaVine, better fit than people are giving it credit for. Contract not as bad as people think, but still some hurdles that make it maybe not something they should do. I would lean no right now, but there's some reasons to do it. Caruso is the guy there. One more thing to talk about today. The G League is going. The Mad Ants are going. Oscar Tshiebwe looks incredible. Grabbing rebounds. He's got some other stuff he needs to work on. Let's talk about that. And if you do catch the Mad Ants games, what you need to be watching for from a Pacers perspective. Before we talk about all that, though, we are going to talk about the great people over at Prize Picks who are making daily fantasy sports made easy. It's just you against the numbers. It's an absolute blast. Most exciting way to play DFS. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections. Watch your winnings roll in. With basketball season here with the NFL, you can do combo projections across football and basketball with their specials league. They have a league created specifically for combo projections. For example, LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus receptions, for example. Or just do a basketball one. Tyrese Halliburton, more or less than 9.5 assists, for example. I don't know if that's a real line, but that's an example of how it works. They even have a reboot policy, so your entries stay in play, even if one of your players gets hurt. Prize Picks, an absolute blast. The only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. You've got to try it yourself. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use that code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's right, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. You can get a first deposit match up to $100. I highly recommend you checking out Prize Picks daily fantasy sports made easy. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day for your second listen. Locked On Magic, Pacers' next opponent, Sunday night. Philip Rossman-Reich will have the latest on the Magic. And Goga Bitadze starting at center for them. With Wendell Carter hurt, he's been starting for a couple games now. Credit to Goga. He's done well in Orlando. We're talking Pacers here, not ex-Pacers. And we're talking Mad Ants, specifically. Their season's underway. And I like to talk about them for lots of reasons. One, there's always a Mad Ant on the Pacers at some point in the season. Two, there's literally 3 players on the Pacers with 2-way contracts with the Mad Ants. 3, there's a pretty good chance, based on what we've been hearing from Rick Carlisle, that at some point when the calendar allows for it, you'll see Jarris Walker and or Ben Shepherd, maybe just Shepherd, who knows, play for the Mad Ants to get game reps, especially if the Pacers remain healthy and can't find time for those guys, which I think is good. Taylor Hendricks already playing for the Jazz G League team. It's not that crazy for a lottery pick to be down there. It is what it is on a deep team. We'll see where that all shakes out. Man, it's underway. They're 2-1 so far. Lost the home opener that I went to, but won their second home game and won in Sioux Falls against the Skyforce. So what do you need to know about the Mad Ants? 1, Their two-way players are all pretty raw, all learning a little bit. Isaiah Wong, they're trying to teach point guard skills to clearly, right? He could score. We know that. He's a scoring guard at heart. He did that at Miami very well. He's a good off-ball player. He transitioned a little more to being a point guard his senior year. We talked about that back in August on the How Isaiah Wong and Other Guards Can Help the Pacers show. But he's really playing point guard for the Mad Ants. And there's some Elfrid Payton there, and there's some Darius McGee there, but they're trying to grow Isaiah Wong as a lead ball handler, creator type. And he could score, certainly, but he's got work to do as a creator. And I think that is part of his rawness. But he's looked okay so far. He's definitely one of their better scorers already, which is encouraging. Kendall Brown, they're just working on consistency, getting him more skilled. His second year there, but he barely played last year. He had just had a career high 23 2 nights ago, so perhaps something clicking there, made some threes. And then Oscar Tshiebwe. I mean, I have a story coming out about Oscar probably today, the day that this episode comes out. He is grabbing every rebound. He apparently had like partial blindness in one of his eyes for a long time. So now he's going to start playing with goggles. He said once he starts wearing them, he's going to step out more because he can see the rim better for shooting. A lot of crazy stuff in his journey. You can read about the partial blindness. I just found out about this because he tweeted a picture of himself in goggles. But he grabbed 23 rebounds in his very first G League game. To be clear, the G League record for rebounds in a game is 24. So he is just dominating the glass. Like, I went to their first home game, and I think he had 15 rebounds that game, and it didn't even feel like he had that many, right? He just scoops them up. He, like Wong and Wong and Brown, is very raw. A lot of work to do with skills, right? He's not the greatest with the ball. He's got to shoot better. And like I said on yesterday's show, like in college, when you defend the pick and roll, you can drop back pretty far because they're worth shooters. You can stand in the lane as long as you want. You can't do that at the pros. He's got a lot of work to do on the defensive end, but they all have redeeming qualities. I think Brown's a good defender. He's really athletic. Tshiebwe is a beast on the glass. Wong can score. Seeing how they can grow, right? Pacers drafted two of those three guys with a draft pick, and they scooped Tshiebwe up right after the draft. They clearly are invested in them, and Tshiebwe is putting up numbers. So keeping up with those guys is one of the key reasons to keep up with the Mad Ants, right? That's a team that has guys that the Pacers literally have a contract for. Other names and stuff to keep an eye on with the Mad Ants. 2 NBA vets on the team, NBA guys. Now that you can make more in the G League and a lot of them are in NBA cities, it's a nice path to one, play basketball professionally, and 2, try to get back to the league if you can. Jordan Bell, former champion, played for the Warriors for a while. He's been with the Mad Ants before. Good vet for them to have. Good leader guy. Has been battling with Tshiebwe on the boards when he can. Tshiebwe's kicking his butt. But Jordan Bell, good player, worth watching. If the Pacers need big man help at some point during 10-day contract season, perhaps they look there. And the other one, a guy I talked to last year, Elfrid Payton. You can see an interview with him on the Locked On Pacers YouTube channel. Speaking of, if you're on the Locked On Pacers YouTube channel, interview with Tyrese Haliburton at his Thanksgiving event in Cambridge yesterday is posted if you want to hear from him. Either way, Elfrid Payton, former top 10 pick, was in the league for like 8 or 9 years. He's another guy worth watching. He's been injured, so hasn't played a ton, but he was good for them last year. Craig Sword has NBA experience on this team. Kyle Mangus, an Indiana native, guys worth watching. Darius McGee can really shoot it. Eventually, Mojave King, their 47th overall pick, will return to play. But the other names I would recommend keeping an eye on, who you maybe haven't heard of or don't have as much NBA experience, or just names. Pedro Bradshaw is one. I am slowly getting to for sure thinking Pedro Bradshaw is an NBA player, and I have very little reason to do so. He moves really well. He can shoot it. He's long with like his length. He's a wing, and he's a good defender. And I am very quickly became enamored with his game. I've told a few people that I'm like, I think he's really good. He'd be in the NBA. I added him to a list I have on my phone of G League guys that at the time of watching them, I thought were NBA players. Right? The list in the past, Jared Utoff, who was at the time, had NBA experience and became an NBA player. Ben Moore, who became an NBA player for 2 games. I kind of missed that one. Walt Lemon, who had some NBA experience and became an NBA player. O'Shea Brissett, who is now an established NBA player. Jermaine Samuels, who got a 2-way this year with Houston. And now Pedro Bradshaw. That is my list of Mad Ants crushes for forever. I think he's good. I think he's got a chance to be something. He's a guy, to me, worth keeping an eye on down there in the G League. And McGee's the other one, just because his range is so crazy. I mean, that dude can shoot and score and do stuff with the ball really well. The Mad Ants are going to be pretty good this year, I think. They've got a talented team. They've got NBA vets. They've got good 2-way guys. They all fit together. Tom Hankett has done well with that team. They're worth watching for lots of reasons, because these guys could end up on the Pacers, and some currently are. Eventually, they could have some of the Pacers' first-round picks on them. And If you're local, lucky you. They're not in Fort Wayne anymore, and they're not in Noblesville yet because their arena's not built. So you can watch their games in Cambridge. They played at 6 p.m. Monday night. They have some 6 p.m. games, which is great if you're trying to come after work. And then they have some that they're doing that are 12:30, and then they play, and then they're done, and then the Pacers play that night in their doubleheader. So lots of basketball if you can get that sort of fix. And I highly recommend checking it out. High-level games. Lots of NBA guys in their game against Windy City, or ex-NBA guys, on Monday. We'll have more on the Mad Ants as needed as the season progresses, checking in on the 2A guys, talking some Sheboy if they need him with the pros now. They might need center depth with Tice gone. So there's lots to cover there as that team's season gets rolling. Hope you guys enjoyed today's show and this week. Fun shows to do. They had a nice win. They made a roster move. There's lots of news to talk about. This team is in a good spot right now, and they've got a nice game coming up Sunday to try to keep that momentum rolling. We'll cover it here on Locked On Pacers come Monday. We'll be talking Pacers Magic, anything else that may happen over the weekend. Hope you guys enjoyed today's show and had a fantastic week. I'm on Twitter at Tony R. East. This show is on Twitter at Locked On Pacers. Back Monday talking Pacers. Till then, everybody have a fantastic weekend.